Hey, happy Wednesday! So it's time for the next Waste-Free TV. Tonight's video is all about eco-guilt. So what I mean when I say eco-guilt and how I deal with eco-guilt. And I guess what eco-guilt stops us from doing and how it allows us to stop in our journey. I'm going to start in a little bit, just wait for anyone who wants to join live. So if you are watching live, please comment with #live. If you're watching replay, #replay, and I will reply to comments after. So I've just had dinner and we had beetroot pasta. And you know how pink everything is when you're cooking with beetroot, so I thought I'd managed to scrub it off, but I've just seen that I've got pink fingers. But it was a really good dish, it was really nice, so we'll probably be making that one again. And I've also had a really fabulous day today. I was helping out at a social enterprise event with young people where we were talking about, me and another social entrepreneur were talking about our businesses and how our ideas came about and how we grew our businesses, what sort of things we do now, who we work with, and then the young people got some time to build their own businesses. So they were taking any kind of course or anything that they felt they could really resonate with in terms of having an impact on their lives. So some of them picked knife crime, some of them picked food waste and food poverty, and then they came up with solutions to how they could tackle those issues through creating revenue, which was fab. So the winning team were a group where they decided that they'd collect surplus food from supermarkets and then they'd make Caribbean style dishes and sell their food from a food truck, and then the surplus that they'd get in terms of the revenue, the money, they'd get to donate that back to a food bank. And I thought it was such a fabulous idea. I was deciding with the other social entrepreneur who the winner was. I know it sounds like I definitely just picked a project that was like right up my street, but we did decide together. They were all super good, but it was really nice, really lovely day, really rewarding and great fun to be able to share my story, which was so nice. So I got to talk all about school because they're coming from colleges, so I was able to talk about what I did at college and what I did after university, how I got into what I do now, how it's changed over time, all of those sorts of things, and it was really fab. So I'll get started into today's topic. So what I'm going to start off with is explaining what I mean by eco-guilt. Eco-anxiety gets talked about quite a lot at the moment. So eco-anxiety is that feeling of everything's just so overwhelming and so out of our control. We don't know what's going to happen with climate change. We feel like businesses and government just aren't doing enough. And lots of people have been suffering from anxiety as a result of this. I am going to touch on that in a future live, but what I'm going to talk about tonight is eco-guilt. And what I mean by eco-guilt is I mean that feeling that you get when you feel like you can't get started on your zero waste journey or you can't progress on your zero waste journey because there is just too much to do. And I can really resonate with this, and I know that at times it has stopped me on my zero waste journey, it stopped me growing, developing, learning, trying to better myself, because I just got so overwhelmed by the amount of things to do that I felt like, what's the point? So I want you to be honest. Give me a comment if you've ever felt like this before. So if you've ever used an excuse along the lines of, there is just too much to do, like too much waste in my life, what's the point in me getting started? There is literally no point in me making any changes because there's too much to change. Have you ever felt like that? Then the other thing that we tend to do is we tend to say, I know I can't do something, so therefore I won't change the things I can change. So some people might say, I know I can never go meat free. I know I can never go plastic free. I know that I will have to commute to work. I have to have a car, or I have to have a car because I've got kids. I have to have a car because I've got to take a relative out in the car. I've got to fly for my job. There's no way around not using flights. So therefore, because I know that I can never be 100% perfect in the zero waste world, what's the point of me getting started? What is the point? So if you've ever had those kinds of excuses, let me know. I know I have, I totally have, and I know it slowed my journey at the start. I've used those excuses in the past, and I still find myself using some of those excuses now as a reason not to keep going in my journey, not to keep progressing. And this kind of eco-guilt, it really serves us really well, and I know it's served me really well in the past, in terms of it's allowed me in the past to stagnate. It's allowed me to say, oh, I'll never be 100% zero waste, so I'm not going to change this thing that I actually can change really quite easily. I'm just gonna not bother. So it means that we're not moving forward. It means that we're not making a positive impact when we can, because we're focusing too much on the things that we can't do. So rather than taking it in terms of like, what can I do? What can I focus my energy on? We're instead focusing on what we can't do. And then it leads that eco-guilt to grow and to develop, because we're feeling even worse. We're feeling like we're not making any difference. There's nothing we can do. And we start to get really, really hopeless. And another thing it allows us to do is to pop our head in the sand and just think, I'm going to carry on as normal. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And in the media recently, there's been such an uproar in terms of people figuring out about recycling just being the worst thing ever, about how only 9% of all our plastics are recycled. There's been multiple TV shows where they've shown where people's plastics end up from the UK, and it was really obvious that they were from the UK. So lots of people have been making a difference, but there has totally been a whole host of people who have just felt like sticking their head in the sand and doing nothing, like felt like it wasn't their issue to solve. It was almost like, well, I didn't cause this issue in the first place, so I'm not going to make any changes, even though those people might be people who can make a really easy switch and it not really affect their lives that much, or even if it does affect their lives, it's going to affect their lives in such a positive way. And the final thing that it allows us to do, or we find ourselves slipping into, and this one is one that I have done so many times, and I still do it now, is comparison-itis. So we find ourselves thinking, there is no point in me lowering my waste in this area of my life. There's no point in me reducing the amount of air miles I use in a year. There's no point in me trying to do supermarket shops plastic free, because I will never be as good as that person. I'll never be as good as that person that I've seen on Instagram with all those matching jars in their cupboard of different dried goods. I'll never be as eco-friendly as so-and-so who's running a really cool blog or website about zero waste living, or a business. I'm never going to get to that point. So what's the point in me trying? So that's another, like, a mindset that allows us to sort of stay where we are and just keep coasting and just stagnate and not really do anything at all. And that last one, like I said, I found myself doing it before in the past, and I still slip into it now. And one thing that it meant that I was doing was it was almost like I guess I was trying to weigh up what the right thing to do in terms of zero waste was and what the wrong thing would be. So therefore, I was never really progressing, because I was never really trying. And I felt like I I don't know what the right thing to do in this situation is, so I'm just not going to do anything at all, or I'm going to stick to what I already know, because if I try and switch something up and it goes wrong, people are going to judge me because I'm the zero waste girl, and if I do it wrong, then that's setting a really bad example to other people who might go zero waste, or it's setting a really bad example to the whole zero waste movement, and people are going to really judge me for what I'm doing. Now, this was all in my head. I literally had no proof that anyone would treat me like that, and I also had no proof that anyone had ever treated anybody else like that when they started making changes. And I would never look at someone else like that. I'd never judge someone who was trying their hardest to make a positive difference and say, oh, well, you slipped up there, didn't you? You were trying to lower your waste, but actually you ended up creating waste. So why did I feel like other people would do that to me? And that was something I had to actually sit down and unpick and think, like, why am I going to treat other people with so much more grace and so much more lenience than I would myself? And when I overcame that pushed me forward, and that meant that I felt like I could share the realities of zero waste living and share the fact that it's still really blimmin' hard, even 2.5 years later from when I started my journey. It's still hard now. There's still stuff that I'm having to navigate. There's still situations where I'm there thinking, like, should I eat this food that's wrapped in plastic because I'll create plastic waste, or not? And if I don't, I'm still producing food waste. And I'm like, which is the better one to do? Which is the right one to do? It's situations like that when there's actually no black and white answer. And really you just need to go with whatever thing feels right for you in that situation. And when you know in your heart that you've made a decision based on whatever you feel is right, that's the right thing for you to do. So yeah, like I was saying, I was kind of trying really hard to weigh up what was right and what was wrong to do in terms of zero waste living, because at this point I felt quite a lot of pressure in terms of, I felt like, right, I have a blog, I have social media accounts where I am trying to live this zero waste life, and if I'm not doing it perfectly, who am I to tell other people what to do? And like I just said, like, there's no end point. There's no point where we're like, oh yeah, I've cracked this. I'm completely zero waste 365 days of the year. There is never a time that I slip up. There's never a time where I interact with someone else and I have to produce waste. Like, that happens all of the time. So in terms of my zero waste journey, when I was having these thoughts, I was shrinking back. I was unable to share the message of all the brilliance that zero waste living can bring in terms of how it can make you feel so much more connected to your community, and how it can save you money, it can connect you with hobbies that maybe you've never tried, it can get you back in the kitchen, cooking from scratch, or just enjoying basic food like, you know, the fresh bread from a bakery, all of those sorts of things. I wasn't spreading that message because I felt like, who am I to spread a message when I am not perfect? It was that eco-guilt speaking to me and being like, you're not doing enough, you can't share what you're doing, you need to keep going. But then on the other hand, I was like, I don't know what to do. So I was just keeping this all in for myself and just really not going anywhere at all. So I'm just gonna have a drink. So what's changed? Like, what do I do now when I get these thoughts, which I still do? So what I try and do now is I try and say, I want to do X or Y. How can I do those things whilst lowering my impact in that area? And note how I said lower my impact. I haven't said zero waste, because sometimes we just have to accept that we are going to produce waste. But what is the way that I can do what I want to do whilst having the lowest impact on my local community, on the wider community, on the rest of the planet, on the people that I live with? So I live with Filippo. How can I have a low impact on him? Low impact on the people who live in the flat building that I live in? All of those sorts of things. So some examples would be, I am on the lookout for a new jacket for for when I need to dress fancy. So I'll be thinking like, how can I get this new jacket in a low impact way? So there are certain ways where I could be buying an item of really high quality clothing that aligns with my values in terms of being fair trade, organic cotton, being made in a sustainable factory where they treat their workers properly and pay a really good wage. I could buy a jacket secondhand, so maybe from a charity shop, maybe online via eBay or Depop, anything like that. How can I lower my impact in a activity that I know I want to do? Maybe I don't have to do it, but if I still want to do it and it's not something that's completely out there and going to produce loads of waste, so why even bother? What can I do to lower my impact in those areas? And another one is about flying. Like, if I know I want to go on a holiday, how can I lower my impact in terms of the travel that might be associated with it? So it might be looking into alternative ways to travel, but that's not always an option to everyone in terms of it can take a lot longer and it still can be a lot more expensive, especially if you're going to need to take like the Eurostar and then some extra travel at the other end of your journey, or go on a boat or whatever it is. So it might just be reducing the amount that you fly. It might just be reducing the amount that you shop, or whatever it is. As long as you have considered the options and feel happy with whatever you're going for, then that's enough. That's all you can do, really. That's what I consider to be a real balanced view about it. So I'm just going to finish off by going over some tips with how to deal with the eco guilt when it comes. So there's three tips that I've got, and well, 3 stages that I go through when I'm feeling the eco guilt. So when I'm feeling overwhelmed, feeling like I can't do enough, so what's the point in doing this thing? Or I'm just feeling completely out of my depth, and like I'm comparing my journey to other people where I don't know their journey, I don't know them, I don't know what they struggle with, anything like that. So the first thing I do is I just recognise it. So I recognise my certain habits that I have when I am feeling that kind of overwhelm, that guilt, the feeling like I'm not doing enough, and I should be doing more. So I'll give you an example of one that popped up quite recently, a couple of months ago actually, not that recently. So I snapped really irrationally with Filippo. So we ended up having like an argument, but I was definitely the one who'd started the argument off. And the reason why was because I was saying, me and you have too much recycling. Like, I'm meant to be living zero waste. Who am I to say I'm zero waste when I still produce all of this recycling? I need to do something about it. And the reason why that had come about is because I'd gone downstairs, and the two of us had taken our recycling down, and the bins hadn't been collected from the flat that we live in. So there have been all sorts of bin strikes going on in Birmingham, but then we also had the shutter of our flat had been broken for quite a while, which meant that the refuse truck couldn't get in. So down I go with my recycling, which obviously, being me, I had carefully cleaned and I'd removed the labels from everything, and like I knew exactly what Birmingham City Council wanted in terms of all this recycling. I'd sorted it properly. And then I get downstairs and then all of this recycling is there, all of this landfill waste is there, and I am just so overwhelmed that then when we end up going back upstairs, I'm there like, we need to reduce our waste, our recycling, sorry. I can't say that I'm zero waste when I'm reducing that amount of recycling, and look at it downstairs. Like, even though all of that extra recycling and waste wasn't really anything, like it wasn't produced by us, but I still felt so overwhelmed and felt like I was really part of that waste being produced. So yeah, we ended up having this argument, and as we began arguing, I started reflecting on the earlier parts of my day and why I felt like this and why I felt so awful. earlier on, a video had come up on my Facebook feed, which was a tortoise, a turtle and then a seal with plastic around their necks. They're horrible, horrible videos. And obviously these animals do get saved and they get released or they get looked after. But I just felt so guilty because I felt like we are putting all of this recycling into the bins, but how can I guarantee that this ends up where it does? Like, how can I be a part of this? I feel so awful that I'm sending this recycling away. So yeah, so it ended up in this argument, but then I realised this. So actually I said to Filippo, I was like, I watched this earlier. This is why I'm acting how I am. So in this scenario, I was able to recognise how I felt, which then brought me on to the second step of reflecting. So reflecting about why I was feeling what I was feeling, but also I was then able to reflect on what I could control and what I couldn't control. So in this situation, I could control the amount of recycling we produce, well, to be more specifically, that I produce, because I can't really control what Filippo does in terms of what he buys. Like, yes, we live together, but I'm not dictating his every move. And I also cannot control the amount of waste that is produced by the rest of the flat. I cannot control whether our recycling gets collected. I can't control whether the shutter works or not in terms of the flat. So there were all these things that were in my control, and then there were all these things that weren't in my control. And I needed to figure out what I could do with the things that I could control. So in this situation, I decided that what I would be doing is I would do an audit in terms of when I was out shopping, making sure I was buying items where I didn't need something at the end where I'd have to recycle. So I was reducing the amount of recycling that I needed anyway. And then when I did have things to recycle, such as papers, card, like egg boxes, all of that sort of stuff, I started to take that down to the allotment and compost loads more of it, which has been really good in terms of like balancing out the moisture that I was getting in the compost bin. And I also, if I had really big bits of card, I would lay them over like weeded parts of the allotment to suppress the weeds. So those were the kinds of actions that I decided I'd take as a result of this eco-guilt. So those 3 steps that I went through were, number 1, to sort of recognise the eco-guilt and the feeling of overwhelm, the feeling of helplessness. The second point was to reflect on what I could do versus what I couldn't do. And then the third one was to do action based on that. The reason why, for me, it always has to result in some kind of action is because when I take action as a result of how I'm feeling or what I've managed, what's coming up for me, I feel so much more empowered and I feel so much more in control, because I feel like, okay, there was an issue, there was something that made me really upset, and now I've made a difference. So therefore, I'm still going on this zero waste journey. I'm still not perfect, I'm still not at the end, and there never ever will be at the end. But I've made a conscious step in the right direction. So I would encourage you guys, the next time you're feeling that kind of way, to go through those 3 steps of recognising what you feel, reflecting on it, and then making action based on whatever you've noticed. But if at the end you're still feeling this awful eco-guilt, you're still feeling like you're not doing enough, reach out to other people. So whether this is somebody online in an Instagram group, like on Instagram or a Facebook group, whatever it is, maybe you know someone who's doing the zero waste journey with you at work, or you've got a friend who's doing going zero waste, and you can just tell them how you feel, what you've done, to try and alleviate some of that guilt. Because if you go to someone else and say, I feel like this and I've been doing this and I still don't feel any better, chances are they'll be able to relate in some way. or they'll be able to congratulate you for what you've already done and share with you what they do in order to lower their waste. And obviously, if you don't have anyone that you feel that you can reach out to and share that with, I'm here for you. I am more than happy to support, to be that accountability that you might need in order to sort of alleviate this eco-guilt. Because the thing is, whenever anyone's got that kind of environmentally conscious mind, they're the sort of person who always wants to be improving and making a difference. And when they feel like it's completely out of their hands and they have no control over it, it can feel really overwhelming and really heartbreaking. But actually, when you're able to share that feeling with someone else and they're able to either relate to what you're feeling or share their different experience, you realise that we are all in this together. You know, we're all people having similar kind of feelings, trying to make the best change that we can. And it's that kind of stuff that makes me feel really, really empowered. So I've talked a bit about like a zero waste journey, like a road, like going from feeling overwhelmed and guilty to overcoming that and continuing on your journey. And if you want a little bit more information about zero waste journey, how to get started, how to get your mojo back, that sort of stuff, then I would recommend downloading our newest freebie, which is a zero waste roadmap. So the zero waste roadmap has different stages throughout it, and it shows you how to kind of get started on your zero waste journey or level up a zero waste journey that you're already on. And it goes through 4 different stages and has a little bit of advice about how to keep going, basically, keep yourself inspired and happy, and how to pay it forward when you feel like you're having some wins, how to encourage other people. So I'm going to link it in the comments of this live, and I'm also going to link to walk through it. So the other thing I'm going to link is our zero waste course, which we're relaunching, so you can get on the waiting list for that. It goes through the zero waste roadmap in way more detail. So it has more live videos, more audio files and PDFs to help you on your zero waste journey and help you stay focused, but not feel like you need to buy loads of things to be zero waste, and not feel like you need to get rid of all your belongings to go zero waste. And also talks about the things that have inspired me on my journey and how I keep going. So massive thank you for joining me tonight. Do let me know if you can relate to any of the eco-guilt that I've mentioned. Do let me know how you've overcome it or what you do to prevent it in the first place. And hopefully that has helped, and you'll be able to share with me or with other people who keep you accountable about your zero waste journeys. So have a brilliant evening, and I will speak to you all soon. Thanks.